This is a screencast focused on logging interviews, script writing, a couple different ways to go about script writing. One kind of a minimalist, almost a cheat way, but a minimum, and one that could be really helpful as you get into the editor. And really the connection between why you would log an interview and how it's going to help you into script writing. So this is our core document, our sequence for making a documentary. And we're past pre-production at this point. Pre-production is all the learning, planning, and participating before the cameras start to roll. We're really in production at this point. People are filming, they're interviewing, they're capturing B-roll. Hopefully that's going to wrap up in the next couple weeks. What really comes next are these three things, or two of these three things. You're logging and reviewing content. So after you film, and you're getting ready for the editing. So you're doing that by writing a script. What the script is going to be is almost like a recipe. So when you go into the editor, it's like you're going into the kitchen with a recipe. You're going into that kitchen with a plan of what to do and what to use, just like you'd have a recipe to bake a cake. So let's talk about log and review content first. Would come before script writing. If you click this, you're going to go to the bottom here. You can watch this screencast by clicking this link. It's going to be a longer screencast than 2 minutes. That's the old one, but I'll update the link in a moment. But we're going to use a template like this one. And you can go right to this link, find this very simple template, make a copy, and get going. So for each interview you make, you're going to make a copy of this, name of recording. So maybe this was a interview with Sarah, right? And I'm going to start watching that interview. Maybe it's 15 minutes long. And what I'm going to do on the left is to write down the time code. So that just means like the time in the film from the very beginning of the film. Even if the first 2 minutes are just nonsense or there's no content really there, it still counts as part of the time. So let's imagine she starts really talking at 2 minutes and 15 seconds. And the first thing she talks about tells a story of growing up in Kansas. And she talks about that for a while, but maybe around 4:30, 4:40, Sarah tells a really interesting story about having a disagreement with her mother. This is a really compelling part of the interview, and I'm just going to put a note here as myself. Let's use this in our documentary next to a clip from Joe about him growing up. So maybe there's something I already captured in an interview that I feel like is connected to this part of the story. I'm just going to keep going, right? I'm going to pause a little bit, write a couple sentences, and maybe I don't even need to pause the video. I'm just going to keep watching it. So at 6:30, Sarah transitions to talking about going to college, and so on and so forth until you get to the end of the interview. This seems kind of mundane and overly simple, but it's really important. I think on one level, it helps you reflect on what you captured on camera. It lets you listen to it. There's a lot of things we're thinking about when we're filming. Is the camera working? Is the microphone on? Am I nervous to talk to somebody, right? But when you just sit down and look at film, a lot of those things, right, disappear. And it gets you thinking about editing, right? This little note right here is just an idea about editing. And that's all this note column will probably be. And it starts to get you ready for script writing. So when you get to script writing, you might decide, you want to start your video documentary actually with that Sarah story about having that disagreement with her mother. And if you do, you're going to write that in the script, and I'll show you that in a minute. But when you get to the editor, you'll know that you're going to go find that story at 4 minutes and 40 seconds in that video file. You're not going to have to know that it was in there somewhere and search around all 15 minutes or 35 minutes looking for that story. You know exactly where to go. Just like, right, if you're going to bake a cake, you know exactly to use 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And that makes the whole process much easier, right? Much more known what you're going to end up with. So this is a template for logging content. Go ahead and log every interview you have. If you're doing this in a group, you could do this together. If you're unable to do that, certainly you could divide and conquer, have different people log different interviews. But if you're in a group, everyone should watch all the interviews at some point. So you're thinking about the editing together, and you all have a broad base of knowledge of what you've collected and all the content and possibilities for editing. Connected to logging and reviewing content is writing a script. There's a couple ways to do it. I would say at the bare minimum, you've got to write a 1-page overview of your story. Here's an example of this in our sequence for making a video documentary. It's gonna, it's only 1 page, so it's just gonna go over the bare bones of like how you're gonna start your film, what's gonna be in the middle, how you're gonna end it. It's no more than a page. For this example, I based this. Here's an example of a 1-page story, or a 1-page story arc, and it's based on this video documentary. If you want to go ahead and watch this video documentary, it's pretty compelling. It's less than 8 minutes. It's about a man and his dog, and some real challenges that both of them faced. It's a compelling story because it talks about the hardships of those challenges and the tragedy of them, really in kind of a humorous way, by telling that story through the voice or the mind of the dog, right? Pretty unexpected and gives you an interesting perspective. If you watch it, this will make a little bit more sense. But this 1-page arc starts with, right, this purpose and vision statement. We've created vision statements all along, so this shouldn't be new work for you. This should be really focusing in on, is that still your vision statement? Is that really the purpose of your video documentary? Then you're really moving into 3 parts: an opening, the middle, and how is this film going to end? The opening hook for Denali, the video documentary, is Ben, the dog owner, and Denali, the dog. They're at a beach, and so there's a little description here of like, what does that look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? I don't get many details here, and I'd have to work that out in the editor, but at least I'm starting to develop a plan. What Denali does is go backwards in time, which is a great storytelling technique. It kind of gives us this, sets the stage in kind of this moment of time. Then it goes backwards, and it kind of fills in the gaps of how we ended up on that beach that we see at the very beginning of the film. And then it talks about really how this story ends. And it's sad, right? The dog, it's Denali's last night, but he enjoys it with Ben. So this is pretty bare bones, 1-page. It's hard to call this a script, but at least it's a plan for storytelling. I'm going to show you one final model here. And before I do, there's another link in here under the 1-page overview of your story to a pretty compelling 16-minute video called The book, The Craft of Storytelling by Brian Reed, which focuses on like how to tell a good story. And he really focuses on identifying these three things in the story: the action, like what's happening, what happens next, how do you compel somebody to listen because things are just happening, right? Some kind of reflection, and really he talks a lot about identifying the stakes. Really focusing on why does your story matter, and he has some great examples of that in this video. So if you're wondering about your story, you're trying to find like a way forward, this might be a great 16 minutes to invest and listen to Brian Reed and kind of think about your own story telling. All right, here's the last model I'll show you. It's creating a 2-column script. So you can click this. It gets into a bit of an example and description. And then if you want to use this model, you can just go click this blank template. You'll see something very similar, very simple, and you can just make a copy and start using it. So unlike the logging of your interviews, this is thinking about the actual documentary that you'll make. So on the left, you're going to start to list out the things that you're going to see and hear, kind of really in order from beginning to end. And on the right, you're going to write things down that you might want to read and record in a microphone. We call that voiceover narration. It's pretty critical to help tell a compelling, coherent story from start to finish. Without narration in a film, you're left trying to chop up interview footage primarily and put it side by side in the hopes that you can logically move from one of those to the next. And sometimes that can be true, and you should do that sometimes. But what's going to be really important is that at some point you're going to have to write some language and record it in a microphone and figure out how you edit that into your documentary. So again, using Denali as an example, this is an example of the very beginning of a 2-column script. On the left, I have like at the very beginning of the film, and you might not have these very specific times, right? This is kind of looking back at Denali as a finished film. But you might know that the very beginning is going to start with like a wide shot of this VW bus driving onto a spectacular beach and circling. That's this kind of moment you want to film. You have an idea about the music you want to use and that what you want the characters to do in that scene. Maybe it's something you've already filmed. Maybe it's something you're imagining and you go out and film. Either of those is okay. But on the right, here's an example of a script, right? So that really that scripting the narration, the stuff in italics here, is the voiceover of Denali talking. So remember, Denali's the dog, right? But we're going to hear a voice in the background during these, 30 seconds. I overheard someone talking about their problems the other day. I had the worst day ever, they said. First, there was no place to park at Whole Foods, and everyone was acting all aggro, so I had to walk like 2 blocks in the rain, and my shoes got soaked, and then my stupid salad was like $12. I was in such a rush to get to yoga that I forgot my mat, and I had to use some nasty loner mat, and it smelled like balls. I don't know what the big idea is. I love the way balls smell. Right? So that's kind of funny. We don't know who that narrator is right at the beginning, but then we start to understand that like that's the dog, Denali. But this is a pretty artistic way to think about what am I going to show the viewer, the audience on the left? What are they going to hear? And I'm going to just continue this on, right? And I'm going to work hopefully with a partner or get feedback along the way. Just on the left-hand side, I'm making a list of the things I see. right? In that example I gave you before, if I have the interview from Sarah talking about that disagreement with her mom that started at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, I'm going to write that information right here, and so I can go back to that interview and pull it into my finished or video in the editor as I start editing this. But right now you're basically creating a recipe. This is going to be your recipe for the video editor. So hopefully that's a little bit about working in the production part of your video, right? That you are filming right now, but you're also like fine tuning, like, what is your story? How are you going to tell that story? And how do you log and review content just to reflect on your interviews?